The raven came just before dawn, scratching at the stone windows of the Tower of the Hand like it had a message forged from fire and blood. Eddard Starkned, as few called him, here stood in silence, watching the bird with tired eyes before. Unrolling the parchment tied to its leg, he didn't flinch as the cold wind swept in. Nothing in King's Landing had ever truly warmed him, not even the sun. The message was short. 3 lines, written in a hand he hadn't seen in years. Baratheons, the king is dead. The queen is a traitor. We must act. Come to Storm's End. It hit Ned like a blade in the gut. He had suspected Robert wouldn't last long. The wine, the hunts, the wound his brother, in all but blood, had danced too close to death for 2. Many years, but now it was real. Robert Baratheon was dead, and Cersei still held the throne with her son, her bastard son. Ned stared at the letter again. Stannis, the cold and proud true heir, was reaching out for the first time in years. That alone said something. The man didn't deal in pleasantries or gambles. He acted on principle, on law, and maybe, just maybe, on the last thread of brotherhood still left inside him. It could be a trap, but it could also be the only chance left to save the realm from the Lannisters. Ned looked over at the fireplace where the last embers were dying. He thought of Catelyn, of his children, of the cold snows of Winterfell far. From this poisoned city, he had come south for Robert, for honor, and now, honor might demand he tear the kingdom apart. Later that day, he summoned trusted Mensier, Jorah Mormont, who had returned to the north for a second chance, and Lord Howland Reed, recently arrived on his own accord. They sat in silence as Ned read the letter aloud. Stannis is making a move, Howland said, his voice low and suspicious. I thought he'd hole up on Dragonstone. Apparently not, Ned replied. He wants me to meet him at Storm's End. He'll want to march on King's Landing, said Jorah, arms crossed. That's suicide without support. The Lannisters hold the city, and they'll burn it before they lose it. Ned nodded. That's why I won't go to him alone. I'll send ravens to the north, to the Riverlands, to the Vale, but more importantly, I'll write to Renly Baratheon that caused both men to look up. Renly. Jorah frowned. He's the younger brother. He's not even next in line. But he's popular, Ned said. He has the Tyrells, the Reach, and half the court behind him. Stannis has the claim, but Renly has the people. If I can bring them together under one banner with the North behind them, they might just stand a chance. Howland leaned forward. You're talking about uniting the Baratheons. I'm talking about saving the realm, Ned replied, his voice edged with steel. The Lannisters murdered Jon Arryn, schemed against Robert, and now sit a false heir on the throne. I won't stand by and let the kingdom fall into the hands of a mad lion cub. That night, he penned 2 letters, one to Storm's End, one to Highgarden. He didn't speak of honor. He spoke of danger, of the lie that sat the boy Joffrey on the Iron Throne, of the death that would follow if the kingdoms stayed divided. He begged them to meet under True Stannis and Renly, both at Moat Cailin, the choke point in the neck. If he could get them to the table, he could give the realm something better than war. As he sealed the letters, he whispered to the flames, let this not be folly. But even then, he knew this was a gamble. He was no longer playing the Game of Thrones from the shadows. The wolf had shown his teeth. And far across the red keep, Cersei Lannister was already moving her pieces. Cersei Lannister didn't mourn. She performed, dressed in mourning black and draped in pearls. She stood beside the boy King Joffrey as the court gathered before the Iron Throne. Her eyes, were dry, her lips pursed, her spine stiff as Valyrian steel. Robert's body was barely cold when the whispers began. Varys played his usual game, floating between lords and fools, smiling with that sly expression. Littlefinger, meanwhile, watched everything, especially Ned Stark. Cersei already knew what Ned would do. He was predictable, noble, weak. He would send letters. He would plan peace. He would give her time. But Cersei had learned early in life that time was a sword in the right hands. She summoned Jaime to her chambers that same evening, the candlelight flickering on the gold of his armor. He looked more tired than usual, more cornered. "He sent ravens," she said, not wasting a moment, "to Stannis, to Renly possibly." To the Vale, Jaime ran a hand through his golden hair. "Stark always was a fool." "No," she said coldly. "He's dangerous because he believes he's right. Men like that don't stop until the world burns around them." She walked slowly toward a map of Westeros sprawled across the table. If Stannis and Renly unite and the North joins them, they could rally half the realm before Joffrey even grows a beard. Jaime shrugged. "Let them come. The city has gold, food, and soldiers, and we have the mountain." Cersei turned to him sharply. "You think the North forgets what the mountain did to Ilya Martell? What he did in the Riverlands? We don't need war, Jaime. We need leverage." There was a pause. Then her voice dropped. "We need to capture one of Ned's daughters." Jaime's smile faded. "They're already in the Red Keep. Sansa is betrothed to Joffrey. Arya's always underfoot." "I want Arya taken into protective custody," Cersei said. "Make it quiet. Make it clean. No threats, no chains, but enough to remind Ned Stark that we hold his blood. If he moves against us, his daughter pays the price." Jaime exhaled slowly. "You're becoming more like father every day." She smirked. "That's the only compliment I'll accept from you." Meanwhile, Ned Stark prepared to leave the city. He had entrusted the letters to Lord Varys himself, knowing full well the spider could read them if he chose. But Ned had gambled again, not on secrecy, but speed. Ravens flew out of the Red Keep before midnight, carrying words meant to change the fate of Westeros. He told Sansa she would stay behind, as her presence was needed at court. Arya, to her rage, would remain too. Both girls argued, but Ned's face was stone. He kissed them both on the forehead the morning he left, his beard prickling their cheeks like pine needles. "I'll return before you know it," he said. Arya muttered, "I'm not scared." Ned gave her a ghost of a smile. "I know you're not, that's what worries me." Within 2 days, he rode out with a small guard toward the Neck, where the first council would be held. On the road, he watched the sky, waiting for the next raven. It came on the 4th day. Renly would come. He was bringing Seer Loras and a contingent of Tyrell knights, traveling from Highgarden toward Moat Cailin. Stannis had yet to respond. Back in King's Landing, Littlefinger paid a quiet visit to the Tower of the Hand, now mostly abandoned. He stood alone in Ned's study, fingers tracing the edge of the desk, eyes full of calculation. Then he whispered to himself, "You should have stayed in the North, my lord." Because the moment Ned Stark left King's Landing, the game truly began, and the Lannisters didn't play to win. They played to survive. The Neck was not a welcoming place. It smelled of rot and moss and secrets, with mist thick as soup and trees that groaned like they remembered every death they'd ever witnessed. But that's why Ned chose it. Moat Cailin, ancient and near impassable. was more fortress than meeting place. No army could march through it quickly, not without losing half its men to disease or bogs, which meant, for once, Ned Stark could speak without a blade at his throat. He arrived with 200 Stark men, loyal bannermen from the north, who rode with grim purpose. Most had never seen war, but they carried themselves like they knew it was already coming. Inside the moss-covered ruins, black banners snapped in the wet wind. Renly Baratheon was already there, dressed in rich green and gold, flanked by knights in full armor and polished sigils. His smile was charming, too charming for Ned's liking. "Lord Stark," Renly said, stepping forward with open arms, "the man of the hour." Ned dismounted slowly. "Lord Renly, I didn't expect you to come so quickly." Renly laughed. "If you knew what it's like to be in the same room as Cersei for more than 5 minutes, you'd understand why." Seer Loras Tyrell stood close by, a hawk-eyed guardian wrapped in beauty and danger. He didn't smile, he just watched Ned like a man who'd seen good men do terrible things. They met beneath the broken tower that once served as a king's seat. In the age of heroes, there, Ned laid it out. Joffrey was not Robert's true-born son. The throne belonged to Stannis. But Stannis lacked numbers, and Renly lacked claim. Divided, they would all fall to Lannister gold and fire. Renly raised an eyebrow. "So we make Stannis king, and I bend the knee. That's the law." Ned said simply. "The law doesn't inspire men to fight," Renly replied. "Hope does. And I look more like Robert than Stannis ever did." Ned's voice was low. "Looks don't make a king." Renly smiled bitterly. "No, but they make an army." Tension rippled through the room like a bowstring ready to snap. For a moment, it looked like the alliance would crumble right there. Then a second raven arrived. Stannis had agreed to come. The letter was cold, blunt, and full of suspicion, but he would attend. Under truce, with his men. And his conditions: no banners raised, no swords drawn. We speak as lords, not rivals. 3 days passed before Stannis arrived, flanked by grim-faced knights in black and red. He looked like a man carved from stone in regret, wearing a scowl like armor. His first words were not greetings. "You expect me to sit beside a usurper?" he said, glaring at Renly. Renly gave a theatrical bow. "Not a usurper, dear brother, just a solution." The negotiations began, and they were brutal. Stannis demanded the crown. Renly demanded a council. Ned demanded unity. "We cannot waste time arguing over a chair while Lannister wolves rule from it," Ned said. "If we don't act now, they'll pit the rest of the kingdoms against us." Stannis folded his arms. "Let them come. Let them test the steel of Dragonstone." Renly's voice dripped sarcasm. "Oh yes, because a fleet of ships and 5 men with no charm will surely win the 7 kingdoms." "You jest while traitors rule," Stannis snapped. "You play politics, Renly. I am the king. You're a king no one wants. Enough." Ned slammed his hand down. The room fell silent. He looked at both brothers. "You want to avenge Robert? You want to stop Joffrey? Then do what he never could stand together." A long pause. Finally, Stannis spoke. "If the North swears loyalty, and the Reach stands down, I will tolerate Renly's presence. But make no mistake, we'll wear the crown." Renly didn't respond right away. He simply looked at Ned. "You trust him?" Renly asked. "I trust the realm is bleeding," Ned answered. "And we can stop it together, or die apart." "At long last," Renly nodded. "Fine, but when the war is won, we talk again. The fragile alliance was born. 3 stags and a wolf had made a pact, forged not from love, but necessity. And far to the south, Cersei Lannister received word of it through one of her many spiders. She laughed once, cold and short, then turned to Qyburn. "Prepare the wildfire," she said. "If they want a war, I'll give them something to remember." In King's Landing, the air tasted of iron and sweat. Fear hung heavier than the banners above the Red Keep. The small folk whispered of rebellion, of a northern host marching south, of Baratheon brothers raising armies. But more than anything, they whispered about Queen Cersei and what she would do next. Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne with his legs dangling, trying to look regal. But no amount of velvet or gold could hide the sneer that twisted his face. He was still a boy, still a cruel, volatile boy, pretending to be a man. And now he was a king with no allies but his mother and his name. "Why haven't we just killed the traitor's daughters?" Joffrey asked, gnawing a chicken bone during the small council meeting. "Let their heads rot on spikes. That'll teach the North to kneel." Cersei's voice cut through the room. "You will not speak of such things again." She didn't say it for morality. She said it because she was still using them. Leverage was always more valuable alive than dead. Littlefinger leaned forward from his place at the table, twirling his wine. "We may not need to kill anyone, Your Grace. We simply need an example." Cersei turned to him. "You have something in mind?" Petyr Baelish smiled, the kind of smile that had no warmth. "If Ned Stark rides with Renly and Stannis, the Vale may follow. The Tullys already lean toward the north. We need to shift the winds. Fast, your plan," Cersei asked. "Send a raven to Lord Tywin. Tell him to move west, march on Riverrun, burn the Riverlands, if he must. If we bleed their families, they'll think twice about raising swords for the wolf and the stags." The room fell silent. Even Pycelle blinked. Cersei studied Baelish. "You want to start a second war?" Baelish raised his goblet. "Better to small fires than one wildfire you can't control." Cersei didn't answer. But later that night, a raven flew from the Red Keep, carrying a single sentence to Casterly Rock: "Begin." Far to the north, the alliance was beginning to stir. Renly had sent word to the Tyrells, who promised 20,000 men. The Reach would not betray their golden boy so easily. And Stannis finally, fueled by more than pride, sent ships along the Stormlands to rally coastal lords. Ned watched the armies grow from atop the crumbling walls of Moat Cailin. And yet he felt no peace. "I've done what I must," he told Howland Reed one evening. "But I fear I've only delayed the war, not prevented it." Howland, ever quiet, finally said, "There's no preventing war now. The realm has bled too long. The question is, will we make something better rise from the ashes?" Ned sighed. "Or will we just crown another tyrant in a prettier cloak?" A rider approached them by dawn, soaked and breathless, dust in his beard and panic in his eyes. "A message from the twins," the man rasped. "Lord Walder Frey says, the Riverlands burn. Lannister men are crossing the Green Fork. They've taken Ned's stomach dropped. "That's a provocation," he said quietly. "No," said the rider, "that's war." In the Riverlands, chaos spread like wildfire. Villages were pillaged, fields set alight. Men hung from trees with Tully banners, stabbed through their chests. Lord Tywin Lannister had moved with brutal efficiency. Jaime commanded the vanguard, carving a path toward Riverrun. The Tullys scrambled to respond, calling banners even as their farms died behind them. Robb Stark was among the first to hear the news. Still, in Winterfell, his mother Cat arrived with the raven trembling in her hand. She stared at him with fury and fear. "They're trying to draw your father home," she said, "to divide you. You must not march alone, Robb." He stood up slowly, taller than she remembered. No longer a boy, not quite a man. "I'm not," he said. "We ride for Riverrun with every man loyal to the wolf." Meanwhile, Ned faced a boiling storm. At Moat Cailin, Renly wanted to march on King's Landing at once. "If we strike now, the city won't be ready," he argued. Stannis disagreed. "We march too soon. We fight a war on two fronts. The Lannisters in the west, the south not yet fully committed. We don't have time," Renly snapped. "Every moment we wait, the lion digs deeper." The two brothers glared at each other, and for the first time, Ned realized he could unite them with fear, but not with trust. Then came the second raven that day. It was sealed in grey wax, the sigil of House Arryn. Inside, the Eyrie will support the north. The Vale rises with the wolf. Ned Stark stood still, letting the words sink in. The Vale, the north, the Riverlands, the Reach, Storm's End, Dragonstone, all against the Lion's Den. It had begun. The Great Northern Alliance was real. But it came not with peace. It came with fire, blood, and the sound of swords being drawn across Westeros. Lady Catelyn Stark reached Riverrun just ahead of the fire. Her brother Edmure greeted her at the gates, his face drawn tight with the weight of command. Their uncle, Seer Brynden Blackfish Tully, had already begun preparations for siege. Before the Lannister trumpets were heard, "We've sent ravens to every corner of the Riverlands," Edmure said as he walked with Cat along the battlements. "Some answer, some hide, some ... switch banners." "And Lord Frey?" she asked. Edmure's jaw clenched. "He plays games. As always, demands promises from both sides and gives none." Catelyn looked out over the land she was born in. Her father, bedridden, barely clung to life in the tower. Her son, Robb, was already marching south with a northern host. And her husband, he had placed himself in the jaws of dragons. She touched the stone wall beside her. "They think they're breaking us, Edmure. They forget that rivers flood and wolves hunt in packs." A horn echoed from the woods beyond the horizon. Blackfish was the first to speak. "They're here." Lannister banners appeared through the trees, red and gold, bold as flame. Jaime Lannister rode at the front like a man who believed war was just sport. His smile did not reach his eyes. Back in the Neck, the final war council was held before the march. Ned stood at the center of a tent heavy with tension and ambition. Stannis, stern and sharp, said, "We strike the capital. Take the throne while the lions are distracted." Renly countered, "No. We liberate the Riverlands first. We need the people, the symbols. You can't rule ash and corpses." Loras Tyrell spoke coldly. "Every day we delay, Cersei digs deeper. She's not sitting idle." Ned stepped between them. "We split our strength. We lose everything. We ride together, one front. We crush Tywin. Then we march on King's Landing with the Riverlands behind us. And who leads?" Stannis snapped. Renly folded his arms. "Here it comes." Ned didn't flinch. "Stannis holds the claim. He leads. But this isn't a coronation. It's a reckoning. We all ride under the banner of justice." Renly, to everyone's surprise, said nothing. He gave a small nod, forced but real. Ned added, "I'll send riders to Robb. He joins us at the Twins. We march west from there, and trap Tywin between the north and our force from the south. And if the Freys refuse us passage, asked Loras, then we burn the Twins to the ground, Stannis said flatly. Ned gave him a hard look. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But in the Red Keep, it already had. Cersei had prepared for this moment like a woman cornered by fate. She sat with Grand Maester Pycelle, Seer Meryn Trant, and Keebenich, offering poison in a different flavor. We cannot defend the city against all of them, Pycelle croaked. Even wildfire will not stop armies coming from all sides. Qyburn's voice was softer. There is another way. She turned toward him. The North Marshes because it believes its family still lives, he said. Take that away, and you take their soul. Cersei's jaw tightened. You're suggesting we kill the Stark girls? No, he said. One is enough. Kill Arya, make it quiet. Blame bandits. Let the news leak. Let them question it. Let the doubt rot their unity. Even Pycelle flinched. That would turn the realm against us. Cersei stood. They're already against us. She looked toward the window, where the last rays of sunlight bled across the floor. Let them come. Let them see what lions do when they're caged. By the time Ned received word from Robb, the North had passed Moat Cailin and reached the Twins. Lord Walder Frey, ever the opportunist, had opened his gates, but only after securing new marriage terms, outrageous favors, and, as always, plausible deniability. Ned read the Raven in silence, then burned it. Freys want a crown, he said to Howland. We'll give them a leash. The war had moved beyond letters now. The Great Northern Alliance was no longer a plan. It was a blade, unsheathed and pointed straight at the lion's throat. And behind the walls of Riverrun, Jaime Lannister grinned as his archers took position. He knew they were coming. He wanted them to. It rained the night before the first battle. Not the soft mist of the north or the humid drizzle of the Reach, but the kind of hard hammering rain that turned armor to rust and roads to rivers. But still they marched. The Great Northern Alliance had gathered at the Twins. Robb Stark rode, at the head of 10,000 men-young wolves from the frozen hills. Mountain clans, Karstarks, Mormonts, Glovers, and Umbers. His direwolf, Grey Wind, padded beside him, quiet and hungry. When Ned saw his son for the first time in months, he saw the boy still in his face, but something else too, something colder, something sharpened. You've grown, Ned said as he embraced him, their armor clinking together. So have the stakes, Robb replied. There was no time for soft words. Lord Walder Frey, true to form, had allowed them passage only after Robb agreed to marry one of his many daughters. Ned wanted to tear up the agreement, but he knew better. The bridge was more valuable than pride. The combined forces moved west in Wave's northern men under Robb and Ned, Stormlanders under Stannis, and the Reach under Renly, with the Tyrell Knights bringing up the rear. From above, it looked like the kingdoms themselves had become an avalanche, thundering toward the western valleys where Tywin Lannister waited. Lord Tywin was no fool. When he heard the numbers coming against him, he didn't panic, he planned. He knew his son's strength lay in boldness and speed, and he knew the terrain like the back of his armored hand. He split his forces, sent Jaime east toward Riverrun to press the siege harder, and fortified the Golden Tooth, preparing to break the alliance before it even crossed into the Westerlands. His orders were clear. Delay the army, cut off the north. From supply lines, bleed them slowly and, when they falter, crush them. But he underestimated one thing. Ned Stark's patience had died the moment Arya went missing. The first blow came near Fitty Market. It wasn't a full battle, it was an ambush. Lannister scouts spotted a column of Stark bannermen, assumed it was isolated, and struck with fire arrows and mounted riders. They thought it would be an easy slaughter. It wasn't. The northern men lured them in, surrounded them with archers, hidden in the woods, and flanked them from the riverbanks. Grey wind tore through horsemen like cloth. Robb's blade found neck after neck. When it was over, more than 300 Lannisters lay dead or drowning, and the survivors were sent back with one message carved into a stripped corpse: the North remembers. By the time the full host reached the gates of Riverrun, Jaime Lannister's siege lines had tightened. He expected Edmure to break. Instead, he found himself outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Renly's forces arrived first, storming the east bank under the golden roses of House Tyrell. Then came the banners of Stannis Black Stags on red fire to Lannister's supply wagons and trampling outriders beneath hooves. And when the northern host arrived, howling and thundering down the hill, Jaime finally realized he was trapped. But he didn't flee. Jaime Lannister, Kingslayer, rode into battle laughing. The Battle of Riverrun broke the illusion of Lannister invincibility. It was chaos mud, steel, screaming horses, and blood. Robb fought like a ghost, his beside him. Renly's knights cut through the Lannister lines, elegant but deadly. Stannis was grim and unyielding, holding the river crossings with fire and stone. Jaime led a desperate cavalry charge at dusk, slicing through Tully guards, almost reaching the castle gate, but he was knocked from his horse by a northern axe. Captured, bloody, but alive. Ned Stark stood over him in the dark. "You have your father's arrogance," Ned said, sword in hand. Jaime grinned through a split lip. "And my sister's sense of timing." "What does that mean?" Ned demanded. "She has your daughter." Word of Jaime's capture travelled fast. Cersei received it in silence. She stood at the window of the Red Keep, staring down at the city lights below. Then she turned to Qyburn. "Make it look like an accident," she said. Arya Stark never arrived for her fencing lesson that evening. When the raven reached Ned, he read it in the pale light of dawn. There was no signature, no crest, just a single line. "Arya Stark is dead. The wolves have howled. Now let them bleed." The paper crumpled in his hand, and something inside him broke. Robb tried to speak. Ned said nothing, just stared out at the battlefield still littered with Lannister bodies. The Great Northern Alliance had won its first true victory, but the price was too high. Ned Stark, once a man of honor and mercy, stared into the fire that night, and for the first time he whispered, "No more mercy, no more peace." They buried an empty box under the weeping willow beside Riverrune's Godswood. No one had Arya's body. No one had Arya's body. No one could even confirm her death. But the letter had done its damage. Robb carved her name into the wood with shaking hands. Cat wept. Sansa, still trapped in King's Landing, didn't even know. And Ned Stark, he never cried. He stood over the box, silent, unmoving, a storm locked inside a man. Once, honor had been his compass. Now, all he had was a name to avenge. The Alliance wanted to press on immediately, strike Casterly Rock, then the capital, but Ned insisted otherwise. "We hold Riverrun for 3 days," he declared to the War Council. "We mourn, then we march west." Stannis didn't argue. Renly fidgeted. The Tyrells sent messages back to Highgarden. "Speaking of glory, but also of concern. "He's changed," Loras whispered to Renly as they walked the halls of River. "He's colder, dangerous. He's a Stark," Renly muttered. "They break quietly, then they start breaking everyone else." By the third day, the lions roared back. Tywin Lannister, furious at Jaime's capture, launched a brutal offensive. Villages were raised from Ashmark to Red Lake. Refugees fled east. Ravaged towns painted the path of Tywin's march like blood splatters on a map. But Ned was ready. He split the alliance into three. Stannis would hold Riverrun and the central river lens. Renly and the Tyrells would feint toward the Reach. To mislead Tywin, Ned and Robb would lead the northern host west, directly toward Casterly Rock. It was bold, risky, a mistake, some whispered, but it worked. While Tywin focused east, expecting Renly to strike, the wolves came from the north like winter. The march through the Westerlands was slow and bitter. The land was scorched behind every retreating Lannister patrol. Wells poisoned, storehouses emptied. Still, the northern men advanced. Robb grew harder with each day. No longer the young wolf of stories, he was sharper, quieter, more like his father than he ever realized. He didn't joke, he didn't rest. He trained every night, even after. Long marches. One evening, he said quietly to Ned, "I used to dream of seeing Casterly Rock. Now I just want to watch it burn." Ned placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Not burn, Robb. Fall. Burning is for monsters." But even as he said it, he didn't feel it. Not anymore. Back in King's Landing, Joffrey ordered Sansa to wear black. "Your sister's dead," he sneered. "You should look the part." Sansa, pale and trembling, said nothing. But that night she pricked her finger on a hairpin and watched the blood run down her hand. Arya wouldn't have cried, she thought. Arya would have stabbed. Him already. And in the shadows, Varys watched everything. The war's next great reckoning came at Castamere. House Rain, long dead, had once defied the Lannisters' herald, paid in blood and song. Now, the Great Northern Alliance took the ruins as a staging ground for their final push. But what they found shocked them. Tywin's men had fortified it against barracks, siege weapons, even wildfire pits left behind in old tunnels. Ned gave a single command: flood the tunnels, then seal them with stone. He didn't want another verse added to the reigns. Of Castamere, let the ghosts stay buried. They left the Lannister dead inside. By the time they reached the walls of Casterly Rock, the banners of House Stark flew from dozens of towers along the western coast. The Lannisters were bleeding. Their gold couldn't buy them time anymore. But Casterly Rock was no easy prize. It stood defiant on the cliffs, imposing, ancient, proud, and Tywin had returned. For the first time, father and son stood opposite, each other on the battlefield. Ned Stark in wolf-grey, Tywin Lannister in crimson and gold. They met under a white flag on a rocky bluff. "You've made a mistake, Stark," Tywin said without emotion. "You've pushed too far. You'll never hold the West." Ned didn't flinch. "You burned the Riverlands. You murdered children. You made this war." Tywin's jaw twitched. "I preserved order. Something you'll never understand. Honor is a poor shield when the arrows fly." Ned stared at him. "I'm not here for honor," he said. "I'm here for vengeance." They did not shake hands. That night, the siege began. And within the rock, Cersei Lannister received a raven from Qyburn. He wrote only one word: alive. Arya Stark had escaped. The siege of Casterly Rock wasn't swift. It was methodical, cruel, and merciless. Ned Stark made no speeches, gave no warnings. His army surrounded the fortress like the ocean encircling an island, cutting off all food, all water, all hope. No messengers were allowed to leave, and every raven that flew was shot from the sky. Tywin Lannister, inside the stone walls he once ruled with quiet terror, was now watching them crumble around him. Supplies dwindled, soldiers muttered, and for the first time in decades, the Lord of Casterly Rock looked ... mortal. Jaime Lannister, imprisoned still in Riverrun, heard nothing of the siege's progress. He spent his days staring at the walls, wondering if his father would rescue him, or abandon him as he had so many others. Arya Stark, meanwhile, wasn't dead. She had escaped the Red Keep through dark tunnels and darker luck. It was Gendry who'd helped her. Gendry and a nameless man with a scarred face and a coin from Braavos. They rode hard for days, hiding by night, stealing bread and killing twice. By the time Arya reached the Vale, she looked like a shadow of herself, ragged, lean, wild, alive. When Lord Jon Royce saw her dismount, blade in hand and tears in her eyes, he dropped to one knee. "The North has risen," he said. Arya simply whispered, "Where's my father?" Back at Casterly Rock, the final siege began at dawn. Stannis led the assault from the north cliff, sending flaming trebuchets into the outer towers. Renly, reluctantly but loyally, led a cavalry feint to draw out Lannister, reinforcements only, to shatter them with Tyrell spears hiding in the tree line. But the true breach came from below. Howland Reed's Crannogman had found a forgotten tunnel in the rock assault cave once used by Lannister miners generations ago. The northern wolves and 100 hand-picked men slipped in under darkness, emerging behind the gatehouse just before dawn. The gates fell with a sound that shook the sky, and with them, so did the House of Lannister. Tywin Lannister was found in the throne chamber of his own keep, seated and silent, blade in hand. He refused to surrender. "I am the realm," he said coldly to Ned. "Without me, this country will rot." Ned Stark looked him in the eye. "No," he said, "with you, it already has." He gave the execution to Robb, and the young wolf, with all of Westeros watching, took Tywin Lannister's head. The war didn't end that day, but it broke the spine of the lion. King's Landing, now surrounded, collapsed under the weight of fear. The people rose up, starving and betrayed. Gold cloaks threw down their swords. The Tyrell fleet blocked. The Blackwater and the Iron Throne sat empty for the first time in decades. Cersei tried to flee, but Arya found her first. In the tunnels beneath the Red Keep, where Varys once whispered and plotted, Arya stepped from the shadows like death in flesh. "You killed me once," she said, blade in hand. "Let me return the favor." And when she left the tunnels, she wore the face of a queen. 2 weeks later, Ned Stark stood in the throne room. Stannis by his side, Renly too. Robb, grim-faced, held Grey Wind's fur in one hand, Arya's hand in the other. Sansa entered last, thin and pale, but with fire behind her eyes. The Great Northern Alliance had not just won a war, it had ended a dynasty. No Targaryen returned to reclaim the seat. No Baratheon had earned the loyalty of all. The throne stood, cold, empty, and blood-stained. And so Ned Stark, tired and worn, stepped forward. "I do not want this crown," he said, "and I do not trust any man who does." He turned to the lords gathered. "We fought to free the realm from tyranny. to place another tyrant on this throne. Let the kingdoms rule themselves. Let the north be free. Let the south heal. Break the wheel, not rebuild it. Some cheered, some argued, but none challenged him, because the man who had risked everything for unity had no desire to rule. Over it, in the years that followed, Westeros changed. The 7 kingdoms became 6. The north crowned Robb Stark as king in the north, with Arya as his shadow, and Sansa as the heart that held it together. Renly ruled the Reach as warden of the south, marrying Margaery Tyrell, more out of duty than love. Stannis returned to Dragonstone, silent but respected, the man who could have ruled but didn't. And Ned, he returned to Winterfell, quiet, greyer, wiser. He knelt at Arya's grave every year, even though it was empty, because some wounds don't heal, not even when you win.